Great. All right, we're going to reconvene our meeting and shift gears to H-158 and welcome our Legislative Counsel, Michael O'Grady, to walk us through the latest changes.
Should I just walk through changes?
I think so.
Okay, this is Michael O'Grady with Office of Legislative Counsel. You have draft 2.1 in front of you of the House Environment and Energy Committee amendment. The first change is on page 2 in the definition of container about whether or not to just reference metal or aluminum. It's now aluminum or other metal. Over the break, Matt and I talked and recalled probably from the 70s, those little high C drinks that were in tin. So this would cover anything that's made out of metal.
But I mean, actually to that point though, like the little pineapple things still, or a V8 can, but aren't they lined with?
Had to do it.
Aren't they lined with
Probably.
nasty chemicals? PFAS? Yeah,
But they are recyclable.
but not everything. Like a straight up aluminum soda can or beer can is not lined. It's just, is it? I mean, it's so reusable. It's 60 days, we heard. So I don't know. I just think they're. Is it our intention to bring those in is the question. So
They were probably already in, right? Because the definition in existing law says metal. So by expanding it to all liquids intended for human consumption, they would have already been in. Pineapple juice, V8, they would have been in.
in the existing law, no,
No,
in the proposed change law,
proposed change.
right? Right. I guess I'm feeling like we just want aluminum. I don't.
I'm gonna go to the store over the weekend and find out if there's any tin cans still left on the shelf. You know, the old V8, you mentioned V8.
There are.
Made into gel.
Yeah. Yes.
Tin or tin cans.
We recycle it.
How big are those? You go in the metal bin, they're free.
Let's move on because I don't want to get stuck on this.
On page 3, the previous draft had struck mixed wine drink, but Matt pointed out that mixed wine drink is subject to the deposit now. And if I struck the definition and didn't somehow reference that it was going to be continue to be subject to the deposit, it would probably fall under the definition of vinous beverage and then would not be subject to the deposit until 27. So mixed wine drink definition remains in, and then underneath the definition of vinous beverage, it said, as used in this section, vinous beverages does not mean cider or a mixed wine drink.
But to be clear, they're already doing this. They already have.
Subject to the deposit. Okay, should I move on?
Just 1 second, if we can, is there an extra copy of one?
There is another copy.
We just completed page 3.
On page 4 at the bottom of the page, line 20, I made a change that said stewardship organization. It should say producer responsibility organization. So this is just ensuring consistency of terms. And then the next change is on page 5. This is the change to the escalator and the deposit. So if the secretary determines that the producer responsibility organization failed to meet the relevant redemption rate goal established in section 1534 of this title for 2 consecutive years for one or more beverage container category, the beverage container deposit for that category established in subsection A shall increase by 5 cents. within 1 year of the secretary's determination, manufacturers and distributors shall comply with the labeling requirements before assessing the relevant deposit for the beverage container. You will see later on that the PRO is going to be reporting its redemption rate per container category. The container categories are wine bottles, liquor bottles, and all other containers. So if it fails to meet redemption rate for one or more of those categories, it's going to go up after 2 consecutive years.
And we, what I learned in between sessions is that the previous proposal was that if the, maybe I knew this from the previous draft, just to remind us that if the goals weren't met, there was a go back to the agency provision. Do I have that right? And see if an adjustment was necessary to the deposit.
Right, it was a recommendation from the agency.
Yep. And that's what came out of the stakeholder group.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that because there was language at one time that would have automatically increased the deposit.
Okay. Keep going.
Okay. Page 8, that's going to be where wine stickers and inventory exception are. Page 8, line 9, the secretary, so Secretary of Natural Resources may allow manufacturer or distributor finest beverage wine bottles to attach a conspicuous adhesive sticker to its beverage containers to indicate the deposit information required in subsection A, provided that the size, placement, and adhesive qualities of the sticker are as approved by the secretary. The sticker shall be affixed by the manufacturer or the distributor.
What about the retailer?
Pardon?
What about the retailer?
That's up to you. That's a policy call. I was just, I was working off of language where on page 8, line 5 and 6, for the liquor bottles, it says the sticker shall be affixed by the manufacturer. So I went with that model, but you could allow retailers if you would like.
Well, I think so, because the topic came up, or like, what if it's already cased? The retailer buys a case of them and they're already sealed in their case. So I think we need to add the retailer.
Right, so then I would change that language to say the sticker may be affixed by the manufacturer, the distributor, or the retailer.
Sure.
Just have to change it in the first line.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, and Matt's in the room and we have a question on E.
Sure.
What is
So
that?
Philman has an idea what I did for 15 minutes yesterday and could not figure out where this was from, what it was intended to do.
Oh, you know what?
Yeah, I think
It comes from like a glass that has it in, like it's in the mold of the glass. And those have kind of gone away.
Maybe.
Has
We were trying to do whether,
yes.
it very well could be.
Oh. Do we need it anymore? I think the only caution about striking it is just people are going to ask us on the floor, what is this? You say like,
we don't know.
we don't know, so we took it out. That's not a good, like, leave all the parts kind of tinkering philosophy.
What's that got to do with the cans on the top where it's etched in?
Like this.
Well, it's permanently labeled.
Labeling. This section shall not apply to labeled beverage containers. We're in the labeling section. Doesn't make any sense.
It really doesn't.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think we delete it.
What's that? The blue,
Yeah.
Thank you.
like still highlighted.
Maybe somebody on the floor will know.
All right, let's move on.
So the next change is page 8, line 16. This is the inventory exception. You probably have a couple of decisions to make here. The section shall not apply to a beverage container containing a vinous beverage if a distributor or retailer purchased the beverage container prior to July 1, 2023. That's the effective date of this act. And the container is sold prior to January 1, 2028. That's 1 year after the wine is subject to the bottle deposit.
Okay.
Basically, they get that time period to sell that inventory.
Yeah, Representative.
But what happens if they buy the bottle in 24? This doesn't go into effect, so labels won't be placed on bottles until 28.
I think Representative Baumgart's, there's going to be a lot of wine sales right before anything that's unlabeled.
Noted.
Right before January 1, 2028. Thing unlabeled will probably be,
When will the labels become available? When will they start to be on bottles? Because you're going to have, if it doesn't go into effect until January 1 of 28,
right, so
be selling wine on the December 31st. It's not labeled. We're still going to have a big inventory.
Yeah. Reminds-
remember the wine subject to the deposit, January 1, 2027. You could say that it has,
Okay, no, I'm sorry. I left out a piece. You're good. You got it, bro.
Representative Logan.
Thank you. The effective dates in section 8 seem to refer to requirements for everything but wine. So here on page 24, UPC labels on containers will be required March 1st, 2025.
right, so if you go to the definition of beverage, that's where vinous beverages is cut out. And it says notwithstanding subdivision A of this subdivision, beverage does not include vinous beverages until January 1, 2027.
Right, so we could add to section 8 for vinous beverages, a similar timeline. March 1st, 2026 is when wine bottles would need to start, new wine bottles would need to start being labeled or have the UPC label. And basically, if we're having a later timeline for vinous beverages, we should probably have the effective dates reflect that timeline for wine bottles, right?
You can, and you can embed the effective dates in the substance of the law, like I did for the vinous beverages, or you can put it in the effective date section. It's really up to you.
Yeah, I think it's already done that way.
It's done that way because that's how liquor was done.
Okay,
Liquor was brought into the program, it said notwithstanding A, liquor is going to be in 4 years.
So go back to where we were. Shall not apply to a beverage container. This beverage, if a distributor, retailer purchased the beverage prior to July 1, 2023, and the container sold prior to 2028. So
I think the July 1, 2023 is really the decision you want to make. You want to give people the ability to buy more unlabeled wine closer to the 27 deadline and then sell it after the 27 deadline. That's really the question.
good question. Okay, so under the way it's written, people would have to start labeling it after July of 23.
No, they have to start labeling it in 27. That's when the mandate goes in effect for vinous beverages.
Yeah.
But this is just an inventory exception. Inventory exceptions are usually there to provide equity to the people that had the inventory before the law went into place.
Right.
But here you have this kind of shifting effective date or arguably a different effective date. You've got the 23 for the whole bill, you have 25 for most beverage containers, and you have 27 for wine. I think you can make a choice about where you want to put that inventory date for wine. But I just went with the effective date because that's we're going to blue it. Matt and I were just going to blue it and exit out and be like, you guys choose.
How did California do it?
California, I don't know how they did the inventory exception. I know how they did the label. I haven't looked at the California inventory exception.
I'm curious how they did it.
So kind of followed us, the July 2nd, 2023,
July 1st.
July, no. Okay, second July, it's prior to July 1st. Okay, so distributor or retailer purchases the beverage on July 2nd, and they are required to label it.
They won't be required to do anything until 27, right?
It's inventory. It's inventory. So if it still exists,
If it still exists after 27, they can't sell it unless they bought it before 23.
Oh, that's a pretty big gap. That's too
Yeah.
big.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So no to 23. Right, so wine comes in 27.
Mhm.
So reasonable is they should start labeling in 26.
26. Okay.
Just out there for discussion. Yeah.
So just so folks understand, right? Like, once you've labeled the container, then you need to conform to the labeling requirements on that container. So if you're labeling in advance, that creates issues as well, right? You have both a redemption issue. We tell people they can't label something or mislabel something.
Right.
You also have a consumer protection issue if you're saying that there's a redemption value and then it's not actually subject to the redemption value.
Well, and so I have a question. So this is only with the wine. Why is it not with the other new covered items?
stickers.
Good question.
Okay. So let's look to what California did,
Okay.
and it will include the newly covered beverages as well as the wine.
All right.
Expansion of the definition of beverage type shall take effect on January 1st, 2026. Is that the requirement when the deposit will be on? Kind of lost my train of thought where I was going, but if we're allowing the use of the stickers
But only for wine.
only for one,
And wine is 27.
So how did we do it for the newly added beverages that we just let retailers do?
The spirit beverages that were just added to, they actually were not added, right? So they used to be spirits and they moved to being 5-cent containers.
So did they have 15-cent deposits?
They had 15-cent deposits on them. If you actually go to the store today, you will probably see they still have
Yeah.
15-cent deposits on them.
Hmm.
The implementation has been kind of a challenge. There are supply chain issues all over the place with both containers themselves and the tops of containers where they're typically labeled. And trying to get those containers changed has been a real challenge. So I will say two things. One is that you have made some changes to the labeling requirements that remove the requirement to have the deposit amount on the container. Have some suggestions when you want me to give you suggestions of perhaps small modifications there, but I think if you give enough lead time so that you can change the labeling requirement on containers so that tops, because for the most part, and I am not an expert on this, but my understanding is you buy the tops separate and connect them to the container. And if the container tops get changed, generally, then they'll be available when expansion comes into effect for. I'm focused right now on just like aluminum containers, but that is my understanding of how these things work. Transition is a real, I guess I will just say transition is a real challenge in expansion or changes to the bottle bill. And it's a real challenge in implementation. It's been challenging with supply chain related issues, trying to get people into compliance and not create absurd results as a part of the transition.
Absurd.
Results.
Yeah, because
Yes.
because technically speaking, if a ready to drink spirit beverage has a 15% label on it under the bottle bill, I am required to tell them they can no longer sell them in the state of Vermont.
Yeah. Well, or they could sell them at a liquor store and we could retract it. Right? Like we don't have to make it easier for people to buy these products.
I'm just saying there are multiple conflicts within the law and within. So actually, there's a challenge with that too, is because you have, as a legislature, set the deposit amount at 5 cents with those, right? So the legal deposit that an individual has to pay is 5 cents. The challenge is the container says 15. What we have done is we basically have exercised our enforcement discretion and said, you can only charge a 5% deposit and you have to redeem at 15 cents.
It didn't come out of our committee, to be clear.
I am so relieved.
Representative Torrey.
I just wondered if this F, line 16. We have something that kind of speaks to that transition period being murky, and just kind of throw it over to you as secretary, and the secretary have to navigate the transition.
And promoted on Friday afternoon.
You know what I mean? So how can we do
Yeah,
that
so
to
Chinese,
kids?
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We don't want to have to do.
Right.
You
It's a great question.
You could, and we've kind of done this before in other laws, put in a session law transition section that allows the secretary to have more discretion during the transition period to allow containers to continue to be sold, even though the deposit amount or the container may not be labeled and the deposit amount may not be correct on the container, and require sort of point of sale notification and or general consumer information in lieu of on the container information during those transition periods. I think that would be a recommendation, honestly, for how you would deal with that.
I think that's a great recommendation. I would like to try that on. Representative Pat.
I think we need to, we're never going to predict everything that might happen in the statute. And I do think we need to give some discretion at the point of time that it's actually happening.
Okay. Next change is page 14. It's still blue.
Another matte section.
It's still. Still blue.
Yeah.
Is this the section that Mr. Chapman was talking about the plans? Where was the section where we're looking at the plan?
2014 report.
Yes, there.
That is it's section 7 now.
But I think it's related, right?
Yes.
It is.
This is what it-
You want to look at section 7? That. Page 21, I think.
Okay, so this is, let me just make sure.
This is systems analysis requirement. And they will look at, estimate the total system cost associated with implementation. They will do an estimate of the impacts of the expanded bottle bill on the recycling system, including how much additional beverage container material will be collected by the expansion of the bottle bill, the operational savings, if any, on material recovery facilities, the loss to material recovery facilities from removal of bottle bill material from the recycling system, and an estimate of the impacts on tipping fees at each material recovery facility, and then an estimate of the cost of operating a redemption center and other alternate points redemption under a stewardship plan, and a recommendation on whether the handling fee should be altered or replaced with an alternative means compensating points of redemption.
That is by 2029.
2029.
Yeah. So 7.
So page 24, line 4, alternative points of redemption. Is that where one might assume there could be an analysis of what it means for the municipal collection locations, even if they're not necessarily redeeming? And then I had another question.
By other municipal redemption, are you talking about Swimmies or are you talking about?
Yes, well, because on page 14, it says impacts to municipal recycling,
Right.
and then it says solid waste management entities, including the materials recovery facilities. Yes.
Three is just about effectively the handling fee,
Okay.
redemption centers, and then alternate is going to be Matt.
It's gonna be reverse vending machines, bag bag drops, other sorts of collection opportunities that the PRO puts into place as a part.
So I guess what I was saying this morning was instead of page 14, section 3, is that, how do we capture that in section 7 as part of the systems analysis to see if there's anything that should.
Well, that is page 23, line 17 to 20, an estimate of the impacts of the expansion on the recycling system, including how much additional material will be collected, the operational savings, if any, on material recovery facilities, the loss to material recovery facilities, and an estimate of the impacts on tipping fees at each material recovery facility. That's what 13.3, similar subject.
And I was trying to find it in my notes this morning, but I seem to recall that testimony we received from Chittenden Solid Waste had something like a $10,000 differential, but then it was like 7,000, so they were gonna lose 10,000, but then if you took out the cost of the glass, it was gonna be like 7,000. Am I remembering that correctly?
There is a. I don't know about the exact numbers, but yeah, I remember that testimony.
I don't know if I have the right zeros. That's what I'm worried about. My only other, well, so personally, I mean, I would feel comfortable with checking back if it's like if my zeros are correct, if it's a $7,000 impact, I would be comfortable with waiting until 2029 to see if this is a concern. Because I don't feel like that's a massive bottom line impact, but others might feel differently. The only other thing I wanted to ask is if there's any reason why we wouldn't say in the overarching one, so page 23, lines 14 through 16, an estimate of the total system costs and savings.
Yeah. Matt has something to add here. Here you go.
Things quickly. One is in the recommendations that we sent over, our recommendation was to the date 2025 as opposed 2025 as opposed to 2029. So that would the legislature and the agency information before the implementation date.
Yeah, that's what, okay. Okay, so then this 29 needs to be a 25,
Yes, please.
or can be a 25 even.
And I agree, savings as well as costs. And I actually think putting something in around the sort of increase in recycling. I mean, I think there are some things we can borrow, like as a total system analysis, and then we have some more breakouts. And so I'm happy to work with Mike, but I think that's an excellent sort of suggestion.
Yeah. Okay, Representative Sibilia.
So this line to me, Michael, so if we move this to 25, so the first part is the stewardship plan is requiring, okay, it's requiring the development of protocols and a proposed pricing for materials. And
Right, so
presumably the protocols would
the expansion won't be in effect yet. And the PRO won't be implementing yet. Well, if you move it to January 15, 2025, they won't be implementing yet. So it's going to be about what's in the plan that
I guess my question is really, how do those two things work together or don't they? I mean, it seems like they do, so I don't understand how they work together.
Which two things?
The, in the stewardship plan, it has to be proposed. Impacts to municipal recycling, so maybe they don't. The impacts to municipal recycling and then the whole Section 7, systems analysis, which also includes an assessment,
I think,
doesn't it? Yes.
I think Section 7 could be a substitute for what's in the plan under subdivision 3. My question is, will they have enough data to report by January of 2025? Don't know if they will.
Or where would the data come from? Because we haven't expanded it yet.
All of this is going to be estimates. So some of it is going to be using all of the information that we know based on system operations and modeling what the economic impacts are of those.
Great. That's great.
When's the plan due again?
October of 24.
So, still not sure that I understand what we're doing here. these two pieces, Michael?
So I think section 7 replaces subdivision 3 on page 14. Take subdivision 3 out.
Okay.
You're still going to look at the effect of the expansion of the bottle bill on the material recovery facilities. You're going to do it through, as Matt just said, a modeling estimate. That's going to be reported back to you. And you, as a General Assembly, can make a decision whether or not to amend the plan or amend the requirements of the whole chapter to address any impacts on the material recovery facility.
So we're gonna get rid of.
It's basically, you're kind of giving like 6 months to a year lag. Because the collection plan, as Matt just said, is due in late 2024. The expansion goes into effect in March 2025. They're reporting in January of 2025 about the impacts on the MRFs. You're in legislative session, you enact something to address the MRFs. That probably won't go into effect until later in that 2025. Because even if you make it effective on passage, it probably won't be effective until June at the earliest. You're just putting in a lag. There's a lag based on the data that's going to come back from A&R.
And that lag is going to allow us to have a better understanding of what the effect,
Right.
the estimated effect, financial effect to the system is going to be.
On the material recoveries facilities.
Just one piece.
Yes. And it's also going to have a
Well,
total system.
not necessarily this one. There are more solid waste management entities than there are.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just, I think the most direct impact is felt by the material recovery facilities. They are going to have prices go up or down depending on how the system is crafted. That's going to result in modifications to tipping fees that will then impact swim meets because they're taking their material from their facility to a materials recovery. They're very good at the point where these Kingdom is the only one who does their own.
They have their own. Yeah.
Right. But everyone except them are going to take their material to a MRF to have it sorted and they'll pay a tipping fee. So by figuring out what the change in the tipping fee will be, we're estimating what the change will be. We'll have an appreciation of what the impacts on local recycling costs.
Yeah.
And again, if you want us to estimate what those costs are, I think that we can estimate what they are at the sort of retail consumer level, and we can provide that to you as well.
And it'll include the wine, getting the glass out, because that will be for the average swimming, that's a huge benefit. And they're bringing and paying for a tipping fee.
It is intended to include any operational benefits associated with the expansion of the bottle.
Oh, boy, tough choices. Sorry.
So what percentage of the glass going into the is wine? Do we know that? Did we get that information?
We did get it. I remember 50, but I would have to double check my notes.
So we're only taking out 50% of the glass. I think so. So is there anything besides?
So there'll still be glass in material recovery facilities, right? So this deals with beverage container glass, but doesn't address nickel jars or any other glass product that a material recovery facility accepts. So that still is going through the system. I don't know percentage wise what it is, but how much is beverage material contained? Yeah, how much of it is beverage and how much of it is food?
We probably got that.
First.
Because it's in the solid waste, it should be in, wouldn't it be in your study?
We will be looking at that, yes, because in order to figure out what operational benefits inure to the facility, it's the wear and tear on machinery due to glass, and we'll have to figure out how much glass is coming out from expanded bottle bill and how much of benefit to the MRF taking that glass out will be. So yes.
Representative Tory.
Well, just a question. Your modeling exercise that you want to do, you delay doing that until you see the plan from the PROs, or can you do it regardless of
I mean, I think we're predominantly looking at expansion, not the PRO model. The part where the PRO model will become more important is when we're looking at sort of costs of collection under the model, but there are only a certain set of options that are out there. So I don't think that there's as much complexity in that side of the equation.
Just conceptually, I like the idea of striking 3 on 14 and having the agency do their modeling as soon as reasonably possible, whatever that is, which then gives us information on which we can make decisions about what form of 3 we might want to do at another time.
Yeah.
So I really don't like 3 on page 15. It assumes a lot of things I'm not sure I agree with. But I do like the idea of getting the analysis once as quickly as possible after the bill has passed, which then allows us to look at that collector. So I don't know what that translates to. Just the framework.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to split it into 2 parts and maybe we have a Jan 1, 2026 for one part compared to Jan 15, 20, sorry, make it a 2025 for one portion or 2026 for the next portion after we see some implementation.
So there'll be ongoing reporting.
Right.
So we'll be reporting back on sort of the actuals once things are operating. I think that I guess I would not recommend breaking the systems analysis into multiple components. I agree. I think our objective is to get it. This is a study that we would probably have to contract out for. We're going to try and get it done as quickly as possible, but we got a contract out for it. And they are some. I mean, I will just go ahead and say going to try and make sure that there's a stakeholder process along with this as well, because I want to make sure that the people who have inputs to data and outcomes don't disagree with how we establish what's going on. So
So how's that funded
through the solid waste management system,
already?
the solid waste account of the waste management system.
Okay. And do you have an accounting of that fund?
Do not sitting here with me today, but I can get one.
Okay.
It is a fund that has a good revenue source that it does not have. So that fund is funded by a $6 assessment on each ton of trash that's disposed of in the state of Vermont.
That's the language that Michael sent us
Right.
through.
When you look at that, a portion of that fund, that account can be used by the agency for its administration of the solid waste management programs. So they would basically take money from there to do this modeling.
Yeah, my curiosity goes back to, what is the finance of this whole system? now that we have. So, because that's an input.
That, yeah, the $6 a ton, it's, I don't know how to say this. It generates significant revenue, but it hasn't been amended since 1981, 87. So hazardous waste was 80.
I would like to see an accounting of that.
I think I heard
Can we ask for that?
Matt Chapman said he could provide that.
Okay.
So is that something that exists, Matt, or is that something you have to create?
It is something that exists. It's just something that's stored.
Yes, I totally get that. So great. If you could send that along to us, that would be great. Right. Can we move on?
Sure. So you're at 14, page 14,
Yes.
and did you make a decision with?
Well, Representative Bongard suggested we remove subsection 3 at the top of the page. And does anyone disagree with that proposal?
Removing that and putting in section 7 in here
Yeah.
somewhere.
Right.
Okay.
Because it's covered in the other.
Right, it's already in section 7.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you can go to page 15. And you will see in the report back from the PRO, they will now provide you with the amount in containers and tons of the material type of beverage containers redeemed and the redemption rate by the following categories: wine bottles, liquor bottle, and all other beverage containers. Now that goes back to the automatic escalator. They fail to meet that redemption rate for any of those categories. Then in 2 consecutive years, it goes up for those categories.
Moving on.
Moving on, page 17. At the bottom of the page, line 15, that is the changing from July 1, 2050 to July 1, 2040. And that blue on line 15 is just my failure to take that highlighting out on that parenthetical. Similarly, I did not take the highlighting out on page 17, lines 19 and 20. There's nothing that changed there. That was in the draft. What did change is the rulemaking, starting on the bottom of page 17 and going on to page 18. So this, and it's blue because I do, and I think Matt does have some questions about how this is going to work. The secretary may adopt rules necessary for the administration of the chapter, including expanding the scope or size of the beverage container subject to the requirements of this chapter when redemption technology allows for convenient and economically feasible redemption. So the problem is that they're going to be adopting rules that say the 2.5 container, which is in statute, is not good law, or the 50 milliliter exception is no longer an exception. So there's going to be rule in conflict with statute. If you did it the other way around, where the secretary is providing exceptions, that works because exceptions go into rule and exceptions are then consistent with statutory language and legislative intent. It's a whole LCAR thing that I'm like thinking in my mind. Like, you come forward with 5 gallons now go into the system, but it says 2.5. And now you have an argument by the advocates whomever they may be, that it's inconsistent with statute.
You have a proposed solution?
I would just turn this inside out instead of it being expanding the scope. You basically give them exceptions and you take away the 2.5 and the 3.0. And you put in here that they're gonna adopt by rule size limits and that they can adopt exceptions to the size limits.
Representative Sackwitz.
Wouldn't that like that would sort of undo the problem we were trying to solve originally by suggesting this, right? Like, wasn't the intention behind this language to make it so that it could be expanding what's included, not keeping stuff, not figuring out ways to keep stuff out?
Matt,
I was gonna recommend getting rid of this sort of authorization for the agency. I mean, if you have established in statute what sort of the boundaries are of containers, I think at a minimum you need, if you were going to do something like this, you need to notwithstand those statutory requirements for purposes of agency rulemaking. And I think that, this is the bottle bill, and it feels like something that if we want to change the scope, the people can bring it back to the legislature to change the scope of the bottle bill.
I think that's true. We should just leave it the way it is and take this out. Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah. And just like, if some great new technology comes along, someone will tell us. Yeah.
And I believe we've already looked at section 7. And that,
You killed it, right?
yep,
No,
We didn't kill it, we moved it.
no,
Moved it, excuse me.
no, we just changed the date.
right.
We're keeping.
Section 7 remains
Like
in.
7, you like 7.
You want to,
I thought we were moving that into the stewardship plan.
no, it's the other way around. The
3
3 from the stewardship plan is now section 7, subdivision 2.
No doubt.
7.
Okay. Okay.
Okay,
Thoughts? Questions?
yes, I have, so for too much longer, can we get a timeline?
I was gonna do that. I've got a note.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Be very helpful.
I was gonna actually do it this afternoon because it's something I can do with minimal brain energy.
Maybe. Representative Morris,
It's after 3, so I'll keep this short.
muscle up.
Buckle up. Back to page 17 on the beverage container redemption rate goal report. Are we still looking at multiple inflators or are we looking at a single inflator from a nickel to a dime, for example?
It's a very good question. I suspect we're going to get feedback on this draft that is encourage us to go move away from the ever increasing inflator and possibly all inflators. So what do you have a?
No, I was just thinking the past bill, previous years, we had a 10-cent, I think I mentioned this earlier, we had a 10-cent deposit on containers. And that was mixed back to the 5-cent. So I'm just thinking going forward, if we want to have success, certainly adding in multiple inflators seems to be in trouble.
Like your crystal ball is accurate. And to remind the committee, the language that I think was in the stakeholder group, if I got this right, Matt, was that if the goals aren't met, it comes back to the agency, or like I said, that's.
I know that that's what asked out of Senate Natural Resources. I cannot remember exactly. I need to go back to the draft that originally went in through the stakeholder process.
So I did go back to that draft. And one of the drafts on Senate Natural Resources webpage has the automatic escalator in it.
Mhm.
For multiple steps.
No, just,
A long time.
no, it was if you failed to meet your multiple year goals.
So
So,
it didn't end, it kept going.
yeah.
Do you have a proposal, Representative Morris or Tori?
What page again?
17.
Your proposal?
Just 7.
It is. It is. It's okay if you don't, we can hold and address it, but if you
I mean,
do,
just to say that in Oregon, I think, they went up to 10 cents automatically.
they had this in whatever we're calling it, inflator.
I just wonder if you can infer that it's going to, that you're gonna get the same level every time you up it, or maybe it's that initial doubling.
I would be comfortable with the initial 5 to 10, but I think multiple. Frankly, I think we could read a report and see if we're having the impact we want and need. And it's been 50 years. This is going to be some transition and change.
So just have one in there.
75% starting to 2026. If you make it, if you don't, it doesn't get done.
Oh.
No, I liked the years. I liked the years.
Yeah,
I was just saying only 1, 5 to 10.
Yeah, the goals stay the same.
Okay.
Because we've been at like 84, 86% in our other areas.
Okay.
Yes.
So I kind of feel like leaving 14 years from 26 to 2040 to get to just 4 or 5% more than where we currently are for other recycling feels doable personally. And we'll get a report if it's not.
Right.
So we're leaving the goals in with the years that we have. And only at any time it has been met for 2 years in a row, it goes to a 9.
Right, it wouldn't go over a time.
Yep.
Yeah, so it goes to 10.
All right. Do you have that, Michael? A change? Because it's
I do.
in 2 different places, I guess.
Oops. Right.
All right. Any final comments? Members? Matt?
Do you want some small comments on the, so I think, let me try and track the 2 documents. On page 7, it'll end up being on the label section.
What are you looking for?
The used to be subsection C. Yeah, actually it's in 1523, right? In subsection C, sorry. So it's on the top of page 7. At the section to say a non-exempt retailer, a person operating a redemption center, or any other point of redemption, they only refuse to redeem beverage containers that are not clean. So in other words, you can't decide to just, I'm not going to take this because I don't like 3-liter bottles or whatever it is. Anything that's covered under the bottle bill needs to be redeemed if you're going to be in redemption.
So only is.
Yeah, it's the only, and then expanding it to make it clear that it Doesn't apply if you're an exempt retailer, but it does apply if you're an alternate point of redemption. That is the first recommended change. The next recommended change is right below that in the labeling section. It is on.
It's on
In
page seven,
subsection A, where it says, the word Vermont.
Can you
the
just-
letters VT,
Yeah.
adding in, and one of the following, colon, the refund value of the containers, comma, the words refund value or RV, right? So basically, the container, somewhere on the container, it will need to say VT and either 5 cents VT refund value or VTRV, right? So that it notes that this container is a refundable container.
Sure, that seems easy.
These are, I don't think,
Controversial.
I don't think so.
Okay, keep going.
The next one is in the,
Representative Moore.
That was currently happening?
well, so currently it has the actual deposit amount. We are actually hoping that people move away.
Yeah.
Putting the number on there and move towards putting like ETRB on the top of it, so that if the deposit amount were to change, there's more flexibility for use of containers, right? So I want to expand the labeling options for containers and move away from requiring the deposit numbers.
But
Doesn't it make, excuse me,
that still would be a manufacturer's change though to the label.
It will be, but it allows for them to maintain the status quo until that change is made, right? So for example, if I have a whole bunch of Coke containers with a Vermont 5 cent, that's fine. You can sell those containers. If I want to change it and sell that inventory out and move to a VTRV change, as long as I get that done by 26, there's absolutely no way that there could be a problem with that.
doesn't the VT refund value help solve our transition problems?
Certainly helps with that transition problem, yeah.
Then we just say, you got to start putting that on there. And then when we start collecting the deposits, they become redeemable. That solves the transition problem.
And so it may not say 5 cents
Yeah. It says,
specifically, like it can't.
and we could say, it can't say 5 cents. It could say VT refund value.
So I guess I would still advocate in favor of there being the transition section that the committee talked about, as much as I am hopeful that the beverage containers will change this way. Having lived through the recent modifications with ready to drink spirit beverages, I would like to never go through that again and have some actual authority in statute that authorizes me to be somewhat flexible during those transitions rather than rely on. But I was very uncomfortable with respect to applying enforcement discretion not to require all of those beverages to come off the shelves. So.
Sure, I followed all that, but I don't know why. Okay, anyway, this is good. I think let's just finish. We got to wrap up.
This is so in.
Page 13, line 14.
Thank you, Mike. So striking by rule, as far as there shall not be barriers to participation in the collection program for retention center, except for restrictions that are authorized by the secretary. Right. And then
Striking except for.
no, like striking by rule. I think we have to okay any proposed barriers that the PRO set up, but doing it by rule probably is not a workable.
Take another year.
So, and then the last change,
Section 9.
actually section 8, adding in a repeal
Okay.
of the beverage registration requirements and the retention center registration requirements once the PRO is up and effective. Right, so
Adrian?
It is, well, it's not there, because it would be a new section.
Page 24 between lines 6 and 7.
Inserting a repeal.
Yeah, it should be sections 1528, NBSA 1528, which is the beverage registration section, and section 1529, which is the redemption center registration section on March 1, 2025, which is the date the PRO is up and in effect. So at that point, those historic functions that the agency had been doing are going to get transferred over to the PRO. I mean, honestly, I'm not certain that we need to continue doing redemption center registrations at all. That can go away, and they will be noted points of collection by the PRO, right? They won't have some sort of magical permit by the agency that doesn't do it.
Similarly, all the beverage brands and products will be listed on the PRO's website, so you don't need to have a registration
with the agency.
If they're not listed, then they're not authorized products.
Right. Got it. Good. Okay. Maybe for the, well,
And then I guess the last two things, I'll go ahead, these are the big ones, right? Is that I think it would be really great to think about waiting on expansion until you have the systems analysis back. But if you're not willing to do that, to push the dates for when expansion takes place back a little. The timeframes in here are incredibly aggressive for expansion, and giving the PRO sufficient time to stand up, operate, make sure that things are working well before you take a significant amount of additional material and put it into the PRO.
and what are you proposing?
Again, ideally, you would wait until you see what the impacts of the systems analysis are, but 27
For everything.
for expansion. So to be clear, we want the changes to go, like the changes that are in here as far as standing up the PRO and having it operate with the existing bottle bill. You do that in accordance with the timeframes that are set here. It's trying to make sure that that structural change, like that we basically work the kinks out of it before we.
No, I get your proposal. I'm wondering what your time frame then would be for adding additional types of beverages. Like how much more time do we need to add to the time frame? You haven't thought about it, we can think about it, I think. Okay, so conceptually, I agree with you, should agree on what that means. I mean, you know what I mean? Agree on the details.
Council's going to provide a timeline.
Not so.
I was just gonna say, my timeline's gonna be a little unclear.
No, your timeline is going to inform this conversation, actually.
Okay.
So make your timeline based on the draft we have. With all of the minor changes that were just presented to us. And were there two larger changes? I got the second one, or I got the one we discussed.
Systems
Wait
analysis.
until the systems analysis, but if you don't,
That was the big one. That's it. Okay.
that's it.
Okay. Representative Sibilia.
Madam Chair, I think it's no secret that I'm really struggling with this, but those timelines are really, the last suggestion by Matt Chapman feels like it can be really helpful in terms of working out a lot of stuff. So I appreciate the suggestion being brought and to look forward to our consideration in the timeline.
Representative Stebbins.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Michael, can you just clarify, the way I read this right now is
Page.
page 24, timeline.
Okay.
That we have the PRO, the systems analysis, that's, well, the PRO is March 1, 2025. The systems analysis is January 2025. But the expansion is January 1, 2026.
Correct.
Okay. So they set up the PRO by March. And then it's 9 months.
Right, and one of the timeline, one of the dates that's not in here is the plan has to be submitted by October of 2024. And they have to register by July of 24. And so they register
July and then,
July of 24, plan October 24. Product registration, March 1, 2025, UPC barcode, March 1, 2025. Prohibit the sale or distribution without participation in the producer responsibility organization, March 1, 2025. So the PRO is up and working the existing scope of the beverages, today's scope. And then in January of 26, that's when the scope expands.
so how long is that? I'm sorry. The PRO is up when?
March 1, 2025,
And the expansion is,
January 1, 2026.
so Matt, you'll get back to us with something that you think is reasonable. Or work with Michael even to get that to us into the next draft. Great. Okay. With that, I think we're finished for the day and the week. Thank you all for your perseverance on Friday afternoon. Drive safely.
Right.
We're adjourned for the day.